Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We're about to kick this thing off here. It's 1:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, so let's just call it 2 o'clock and we can get things rolling. Shane, you're there, you can hear me?
I am, yep, you sound great, Eric.
Okay, good. So today we're going to cover a topic related to the COVID-19 scams, some cyber attacks and phishing attempts. We've done some presentations around this topic in the past, but we're really tailoring this one to what's happening with the current State of the Union and showcasing some real examples of what we've seen so far. And so before we get started, just some housekeeping things. If I have a dog or a toddler break into this room that I'm in, I apologize in advance, and hopefully our audio stays clean and our internet stays connected. Working from home might have a couple challenges, so we just want to call that out early on. That being said, we can go ahead and just do a little bit of introduction here. Let me just get my next slide pulled up. So like I said, my name is Eric Clark. I've been with SWICKtech for just about going on 3 years. My official title is Client Success Associate, and I'm not exactly sure what that means other than I'm here to help you guys be successful. It means a lot of things as a small business. We wear a lot of hats. Shane, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Like Eric, I'm in a similar role to him, a little bit more on the account management side. So I interact with a lot of our clients, to Eric's point, helping them be successful. And we both wear a lot of hats, so we're excited to be here for the webinar today to kind of present to you guys SWICKtech's perspective on security and everything that goes into the phishing and scams that we're seeing nowadays.
Perfect. Okay, so let's kind of dive in here. One thing I wanted to touch on is, there's a lot of things from a technology standpoint that SWICKtech and other MSPs and technology companies can deploy and you as your own organization. If you have internal IT, things like, a firewall and some software and hardened perimeter and all sorts of rules and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, we ourselves as human beings are firewalls. So this is a silly little meme. I always like to try to get some little aha laughs in here. Not sure if you want me to reboot the firewall or if I am the firewall. And in this case, we want to treat it as if, yes, you are. A lot of the attacks that we're seeing and have been seeing for some time, this is not new to us as an organization in terms of our familiarity and expertise around it, but these phishing attacks and spearing attacks and social engineering are devoid of some of those technologies in some cases because they are attacking a particular position, title, or person through some sort of social engineering efforts, and they can circumvent a lot of the other things you might have in place from a hardware or software standpoint. Not to say that you don't want those things. We want to filter out as much as we possibly can. So by the time it gets to you, you're not seeing as much of those things. But at the end of the day, you're still the bottom line, so to speak, or the last line of defense. So we want to arm you as best we can. Shane, I see that it looks like you might be talking, so I wasn't sure if you had something to say there. You're muted. Okay. And I will call out that we do have a Q&A section here on the side, so if questions come through, we'll do our best to answer them as we go. But just know there'll be a room for Q&A at the end. The one we did last week, I think we did a pretty good job of responding kind of throughout the presentation. So if you have any thoughts or comments as we go, please feel free to pop those in there. We'll address them as we can. Moving on. One of the stories we want to start with is a story of an example of this. There's several types of scams and attacks out there, but just so you know what one of them looks like we had mentioned, there was a business in southeastern Wisconsin that lost upwards of about $60,000. That's not a small sum of money that can really have a pretty big impact depending on the size of the organization, whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit, et cetera. Really, no one is out of harm's way with this stuff. These attackers are casting wide nets and they're just exploiting weaknesses. But one of their founders was hacked by using a phishing email campaign. And so one of the businesses, a subcontractor, was actually the one that was hacked. And then the CFO was the one who was targeted, and she had access to nearly all of the company's sensitive data. And what had happened from there was, this gets a little complicated to explain. I'll do my best. but a fake email that looked like it was coming from the subcontractor had come through to the CFO to sign into something. That CFO tried to sign in and nothing had happened. It didn't work, but what she had done was foregone her credentials. So she had put in her username and password and then nothing happened. But what actually, perceivably nothing happened, what actually happened instead was she had given her credentials to the bad actor. That bad actor had then sat inside of their kind of IT environment for some time, and we're kind of just doing some reconnaissance. So as it turned out, she had used the same password to sign up for that information as her email. So that attacker had those credentials. The founder of this company didn't realize anything had happened, like I had mentioned, and so it was a couple of months. The criminal was kind of sifting through emails, and they had seen an email that came through and found the right time to kind of pounce or attack or activate. And there was an email that came through one day from the company's employees who had changed banks and needed to update their direct deposit information. I've heard this story twice in my seat. I do a lot of our sales, so I'm out prospecting and I talk with people. This is the second story like this I've heard. The scammer noticed, deleted the employer's original email and then sent a fake email with different account information. And it took this company 2 pay periods before they realized that direct deposit had been changed. So a complicated, long drawn out story. It just goes to show that this stuff can be more dynamic than one might think. And I want to just take a moment to kind of highlight what we're dealing with a little bit here. Traditionally, what we think an attacker looks like, if we go back, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, because time flies so fast these days, we might think that there's an attacker, with a hoodie on doing malicious things. And that's just really not the case. The goal of these attackers is to make money, and they've funded themselves very well because they've had some success, and they keep reinvesting that kind of like a business. And so instead of being just some random bad actor trying to do malicious things, the reality of what cyber criminals look like in some cases is a entire building dedicated to people working, which looks like a call center really, to infiltrate our networks here in the US. These are typically businesses that are not here in the US, which is why it's difficult to police. But, some of them have a help desk. So if you call, they'll help you set up a Bitcoin account so you can pay them the ransomware. If you're wondering how credible they are, don't worry, they have reviews and ratings. So you can see, well, was this ransomware company easy to deal with or difficult to deal with? And what did that look like? So when we look at COVID, in this image here, really depicts 3 separate waves of attacks based on the amount of COVID cases that are kind of ramping up. So on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you may or may not be able to see that, so I will read it. Wave 1, spoofs of authoritative sources of information, maybe I can't read it, purportedly offering information and updates on the outbreak. So really thirsty for information when this started happening. We really wanted to quench that knowledge and determine what is happening. So the attacks mirrored and mimicked that. Wave 2, new and novel templates were designed exclusively for COVID-19 that moved beyond merely offering new information on the outbreak. And then wave 3, repurposed older templates and social engineering schemes modified and updated to include COVID-19 theme or angle. So the number of attacks and templates that these people have prepared has ramped up significantly, and we expect to see that continue to grow. So this is going to get a lot louder, more prevalent. We're going to see a lot more of these attempts happening. So we're going to break down some of these themes that you're going to see and where they're going to try to prey on people. And this is in the business community and in the consumer community, the B2C and B2B. So when we think about it, charitable donation requests, which is really honestly pretty sad. Unfortunately, it's effective. So if I want to donate to a certain cause, maybe I'll see an email come through. It'll pull on that string, and don't click on those things. It's escaping me the website that we would want to actually push people to if they did want to donate. Do you remember, Shane?
I believe UNICEF is one.
UNICEF is
and
one.
Global Giving, another.
And perhaps Ryan's in the background doing some of the moderating. So Ryan, if maybe you can share those links here. If you really are compelled to help and donate and do charity, if you seek it out, go to credible sources. Don't fall victim to something coming inbound to you that you'd have to react to. A lot of times it's going to be someone preying on someone. The next one is click for more info. Like, again, that thirst for knowledge, click for more information. It's eliciting a reaction and seemingly pretty unabrasive. But again, once you click that, it's going to take you somewhere that could be deploying some sort of malicious code and running, something infectious on your computer. And then lastly, safety notices and alerts. And I think there's plenty more than this, but we wanted to capture some of the big ones that we had seen the most. So notices about safety and alerts of what's going on with your local government and things of that nature. And Shane, if I'm missing anything, please jump in. I think you're going to take over from here for the next slide.
Yeah,
talking about some of the security stuff. So I'll let you share the screen.
Great, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for kind of setting the stage there a little bit, Eric, and getting us a feel for what people are seeing nowadays. It's kind of a crazy time, so it's hard to make sure you're on the right side of all of that. So yeah, as Eric mentioned, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper here. I do want to note that this part of the presentation can get a little bit more technical. We're going to get into some of the ins and outs of what to look for email security. If something jumps out to you and you have a question or it doesn't make sense, feel free to post it. We'll do our best to answer either verbally or in the chat that's available. But yeah, let's get started, and we'll just cruise through some of the details that you should be paying attention to when you're receiving emails. So first one up, really it's just important that you pay attention and understand that when someone's asking you something or sending you something in an email, it's really good practice to always make sure it's coming from who it says it's coming from and that the information checks out. Right, so the first line of defense is watching what the sender is. So oftentimes people will purchase a domain that's similar to another domain to try and trick you. Maybe it'll have a misspelling. Or here in some of our examples, you'll see SWICKtechcorp.com instead of SWICKtech.com. Ones that are really going to trip people up are that like Microsoft-tech support, something that's very similar to what you would be expecting to receive this email from. But it's not just the traditional Microsoft.com, Google.com, and the like. And maybe these ones are going to be a little bit easier to spot when it's an @Gmail or an @Yahoo address, but it's still important to watch out for them. They could trick you up by putting the title like Microsoft support @Yahoo.com in the name of the email address. These are going to be a little bit more common. The ones with similar namings where they have to purchase a domain are going to be a little bit less common, but it's still important to watch out for both and make sure you understand who the message is coming from. So why do we care about reviewing links if you can just check and see who the sender is, right? Just because you know who's sending the email, if you verify that, doesn't necessarily mean that someone hasn't hacked into their account and is maliciously reaching out to you to change some information or to get you to respond or click on a malicious link. So it's important to also pay attention to the links in the email, even if you think that the person sending them is legitimate. In that scenario, you should also reach out to that person, probably not through email, and figure out a way to get a hold of them to let them know what has happened. So like I said, we're gonna make sure we can check out these different links. So just to give you a feel for what this looks like, here's a traditional example of a domain or a web URL that you're gonna have. You'll have that first part with HTTP in it. The core part there highlighted in orange, the mydomain.com. That's really the critical part, right? So if that's different, then it's not who you think it's coming from, right? So Microsoft.com is owned by Microsoft. They're going to have control over any link that you're going to see that comes from that address. And then you can also ignore the details after the slash. That's usually going to be some specifics about the individual web page you're going to and not the domain that you're seeking out. So keep in mind, similar to a fraudulent email, you can have links that are redirected. So just because it says click here to track your package, or it's a button in the email, be sure that you hover over that link to make sure that it is where it's going. Oftentimes, if you hover over a link, it'll pop up right by your mouse. It'll show you the URL it's going to. It should match what you expect, right? So track your package. It's probably going to be ups.com or fedex.com, you know, yourbank.com, so usbank.com or Bank of America, etc. Or you'll have wikipedia.org. If you hover over those and they say something like steal your password or illegal stuff or any weird random string of characters, you're going to want to pause, because at that point you've realized that link is going somewhere you don't want to go.
You sure you don't want to go to illegalstuff.info?
I'm pretty confident I don't want to go there. I know it could be tempting to click on, but I would recommend against it for everyone.
Yeah, and these are obviously purposefully overly generic, but you get the idea. Yeah.
Cool. So next up, we're going to walk through a few quick examples here, just to give you feel free to chime in and say whether or not you think some of these are real. And if anybody has an opinion, you can just say, you know, yes or no, and then we'll go through.
Yeah, perhaps we can get one right now. If anybody is brave enough to put a Y or an N for yes or no, do you think that this one, google.trustworthy.biz, is legitimate or not? Pop in the Q&A if you'd like to kind of engage with you guys on this one to see who was paying attention to the last couple slides. I mean, we don't get any.
We can give you this one for free, and then we'll see if anybody else wants to chime in for the next few. So this first one, definitely not, right? Trustworthy.biz is not a Google website. You know, it's not google.com when you have that .biz address. So we would say no, this one's not a trustworthy link. So next one up, drive.google.com/mydocument. Any takers, any opinions? Cool, so I'm seeing a couple of no's come through here. This one would actually be a trustworthy site because you've got that google.com address listed there. So it's important to differentiate between the two there. So moving down the list, this one, netflix.com, and I'm not even going to try and read that, but it's a whole list of characters. Do we have any opinions on that one? So we got a couple of yeses in there, some no's too. This one is, yep, it's a netflix.com site. It's probably a specific link for a specific video, movie, etc. Moving down the list. So this one's a little bit different. Microsoft.com.pchosting.ru. I'm seeing
mixed reviews on this one.
Yeah, mixed thoughts, yeah. Yeses and no's again. So that one is not. You can see that last dot, the last couple of periods are going to be the domain, right? So that .ru is that final link, which I believe .ru is a Russian address. So I'm not comfortable clicking on a Microsoft PC hosting address from Russia, that's for sure. Another example, bankofamerica.online.silverfish.net. And I can see people are kind of catching on to this already. Yep, you're correct. That one's also a no. That would send you to silverfish.net. Cool. So next up, we've got wikipedia.org. And that one is going to be a safe website.
It's that first slash that we got to pay attention to if we call back to that domain name slide.
Exactly. Cool. So next one, messenger.facebook.hostbin.com. I think I gave that one away a little bit, so I'll probably just go along with it. Hostbin.com, not an official website owned by Facebook. So just make sure you're watching out for those. Those are some good examples. And then this little bit more unique one, which we won't have to vote on because it's a little trickier, but you can see instead of G's for google.com, this one has Q's, right? So they kind of did a little play on that word to make you think it might be reputable, but it's definitely not. So keep that in mind when you're browsing the web and going to these different websites. And then just one more note on the email security links. Unlike an email address, website domains cannot be faked. So once you kind of have that understanding down of where the domain is, that .com address, just keep in mind that is the website you're going to, but you can have redirects in place. So just be careful of that. There could be a link to a website that's going to redirect to a different website. Oftentimes that will mean there's a bigger compromise going on that URL that domain that you're going to. But just keep that in mind, that's possible too. So you should be careful to avoid that. It looks like we've got a note in here just mentioning, yep, you need to be careful with links to legit URLs that could have documents at the end of them. Yeah, that's a great point to point that out. Oftentimes if a website is, even if it's, microsoft.com/tech support/123.pdf, that's going to load a PDF file or a document file. And oftentimes those could be malicious too. So it's a good point to watch out for those as well. Cool. So, and then that third piece of email security we wanted to touch on is the attachments. So keep in mind, any email can have an attachment, a Word document, a spreadsheet, a PDF. Those can have malicious content inside of them. And so before you ever open one of those, it's important to utilize those two other pieces we talked through, the sender and the link information, to know that it is what you're expecting. Another good recommendation around attachments is going to be, if you weren't expecting to receive this from that person, double check with them first, either through text or a chat message or something, just to confirm, or give them a quick call. Cool. And we're going to move into some examples. So we'll show you a bunch of specific examples here of senders and link errors in email, so you can get a feel for what these look like in real world examples. Eric, if you want to take it away here.
Yep, one sec while I get the screen back. Just gonna pick the right one. There we go. Okay, so you guys should be able to see my screen now.
Yep, looks good.
Great. Okay, so in this one, and there were some very specific stories around some of these. They're a bit aged in some cases, and then we're going to go to the, like I said, the COVID specific ones. But just to kind of get a flavor for what we were talking about here, how to identify these things based on what we just covered. If I look at this email, the obvious things to pay attention to are highlighted in red here. So it's saying it's coming from Barrett Gallagher, airtelbroadband.in. Okay, fine. Dear sir, madam, I don't really see any major glaring grammaticals in here, but at the bottom, Garrett Gallagher is suddenly with Community Health Systems, Inc. and not Airtel Broadband. So just a discrepancy in the consistency of that. And then there's two other flaws in here. I'd be curious to know if anybody can pick out what they are. And it'd be easier if we were in person.
Eric, there is like about a 30-second delay here, so you might not get the response right away.
That's okay. So if I don't see anything in just a moment here, that's okay. I don't want to stay silent too long and have dead air, but what I'll call out is the to is just vacant. There's nothing in the to field. So normally you'd see it's to yourself, to your email address. Or maybe a few others, it's blank. So that's kind of okay, what's going on here? But additionally, I'm not sure I've ever received an invoice in a Word document format ever, because I'd be pretty happy to go in there and change the amount myself. So old date, yeah. In this case, I think this example is just from then, but just paying attention to, so obviously the discrepancy number one is that the information doesn't match. It's not consistent. It's a Word document as an invoice, and there's nothing in the to body. So yeah, and then the chs.net, like nothing is consistent here. So some pretty glaring ones, but these are the kind of things that it's just a matter of stopping and thinking for a second. So the next one, let's see, what do we have here? A lot of the stuff is redacted on the top. This is a real example. But the things to call out here is the .co. So this kind of goes back to the URL. They had matched it so well that .co actually is kind of hard to pick up on. And this one, I think, worked on a business, if I recall. It got someone to actually commit to doing a wire transfer. And I would highly recommend, if you don't have Positive Pay set up, please do that. We've done a co-presentation with North Shore Bank, and that was one thing that they stressed heavily to make sure that you're protected a little bit if something does go through. But here it was just really the grammaticals, lowercase I, the number 2 weeks next to each other, a space, no capitalization on the next sentence, and then another, again, lowercase I. So these are things that, you know, should just jump out at you as a sore thumb or as a red flag to say this isn't right. And upon further investigation, look, the domain name isn't actually accurate. This is not who it's supposed to be from. This one was actually really well done. There's no major glaring grammaticals at the time this came through. Back in 2016, this looked very, very similar to a Microsoft email, but based on what we just learned, the @hotmail.com is really the only red flag here. And if that's something that someone isn't paying attention to, if you click on update your account information, it's going to do the thing where it says, great, enter in your credentials, right, and your password, and then you'll do that and nothing will happen perceivably for you on your end, and you'll just go on with your day, but the attacker will have obtained those things and now they can use that to log in elsewhere. So that's kind of what's happening there. And if you look at the domain name at the top, you can tell that this is clearly not a Microsoft website, although the picture looks very similar to what you see on a Microsoft login screen. So these are just things where when you get these things, you just have to put that detective hat on and be a little bit more investigative and determine, is this real or not? Should I have been expecting this email, or some sort of sense of urgency behind this? And then Shane, I think for these next ones, you had a little bit more context here. But the context, I guess, that I have is with COVID happening right now, there are a number of webinars going on about how to, and like ebooks and just a lot of content out there about the cloud and utilizing the cloud in various ways. So that is one of the things that people are preying upon businesses for, saying, oh, you should use OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever. And then you're getting to these places to go through that stuff, and it's looking similar to that. So again, you just need to be mindful of the domain and URL and making sure this is coming from where you think it should be coming from, or that you have something that you've expected to do this with.
Yeah, those are great points, Eric. And same thing with this next slide you just jumped to. This looks like a legitimate OneDrive, right? You should log in with your Office 365 credentials. But the only thing really giving it away, not making it look like OneDrive, is that domain, that web address.
And I think these are some of the specific examples that we have around COVID, coronavirus global donations. So when we talked early on about the charitable donations, this is one of those real life examples. Look, it even says from UNICEF. UNICEF is not sending this stuff out. Okay, this is not what they're doing. And there's some red flags as you read through this email. I don't know if I could figure out where they are on this one. I can't remember, but this is recent. This is February 28th, right? So not that long ago. But none of this stuff is legit, right? It's just
I think a good part to call out in this one, Eric, is you're probably not getting an email from an administrative manager at UNICEF asking you to donate, right? That would be pretty unusual. This is going to come from kind of a standardized account, giving at unicef.com. And it's not going to have, it's not going to have a QR code in they're not trying to scam you to give right this second. They want legitimate, true donations. So they want people who want to give to them.
Thank you. This next one, when we talked about the thirst for information, is we're trying to seek some of the stuff out and be informed citizens so we know what's going on. Get that information from credible sources, the World Health Organization, the CDC website. Pay attention to, when there's announcements on WISN and things like that. For the government official updates that they're doing, I think daily. this is an example of someone trying to solicit that. So there's a call to action, please read more. I bet you if we hover over that link, that's not going to be a safe place to go. You know, that's just not common practice to do that. They're obviously trying to cloak and hide something here. And then the grammaticals are pretty obvious in this one. I hope had equal sign a great weekend. You know, that's not how we speak. And then citizens, there's another one. Foremost, there's another one. You can kind of see what's happening here with the grammaticals and the call to action. And this is from about a month ago that this one came through. And then additionally, another example is kind of this health benefits thing, right? This goes to that third example we talked about in the beginning. This one is just, it looks pretty bad. I think most of us should be trained to see this and go, this is not right, something that I should be clicking on. Anything in this email, how did it get to you? Where is it coming from? You know, what can we learn about this one, Shane, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, right? It's coming from a yahoo.com address, so obviously not legitimate. But then even more so, you know, someone who's trying to actually get the word out isn't going to censor a bunch of the information and make you go to a bunch of different links to learn stuff about it. So this feels like a newsletter, right? And you have to sign up for newsletters. So if you didn't sign up for a newsletter specifically about coronavirus info, probably malicious.
When there are some like, oh, buy, you know, vitamin C, whatever. Walgreens is still open. Like you can still go to certain stores to just get this stuff. Yep. Okay, we haven't gotten to this place where there's no more supplies for things like that. If we look at attachment examples, just this is a little bit different. This is kind of going back into just showing what you might see if an attachment is downloaded. Again, there's some sort of sense of urgency that you should act fast, and it's kind of the scare tactic. It's a subpoena in this case. Oh my gosh. And so you can dissect this one and kind of look at, I think, carddataconsultants.com. I mean, a lot of that stuff actually does check out if we look through the full list email here. The grammatical is not great, but a subpoena coming through with no relation to anything, no callback to anything, and as a Word document, again, questionable, right? Why would that be sent that way? And similar here, a COVID one. So looking at another example that's more relevant and recent from March 19th, and this is not how you're going to see things come through. If it's coming through the Word document, please don't open that. However, if you do open it, what you're going to notice on Microsoft Word is there's a protected view, and that's really helping you. That's a good thing. In this case, this attacker is trying to tell you to click the enable editing button, which is comical because that picture that you're seeing really is just text. You're already viewing this document as you would if you click the enable editing button. Nothing changes from the viewing. You can still see it. You just can't change anything. So they're encouraging you to press that because once you do, what's going to happen is Microsoft Word is going to run what's called macros, which gets a little bit technical, which is going to deploy that malicious software, and it's going to run its agents and do whatever it does. So Microsoft Word is doing a good job of protecting you here. Don't click that if you're not confident of the source, right? And it looks kind of sketchy like this. You know, it's actually saying it twice. Enable editing, enable content. Please don't do that. And Shane, I think if you wanted to pick back up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again.
Just switch over here. Cool. So this is just showing us real quick. We want to just provide you an example of a simulation that you can run. So there's some tools out there. Here at SWICKtech, we offer know before as an option, but there are some tools out there that allow you to run a simulation of a phishing attack to your staff or the entire company, entire organization. And you can see here, you can kind of tailor it, right? So you'd put your logo on the email. You can explain, you can choose, the type of phishing attack that you want to do. And then you can get some reports on who actually clicked on the links that you put in or who entered in their information on the website for their credential information. And this is great as a teaching tool, right? So then you can go back, you can learn, okay, what are people at our organization falling for, so that we can better train them and teach them to avoid those types of scenarios.
And then we can deploy again to measure, okay, how much do we improve that posture based on the human firewall concept? So if we had a 60% click-through rate on an initial deployment, and then we did some education and training around, no one's in trouble here, right? That's not the point of this. It's not to call out someone and say, I can't believe you clicked on that. You'd be surprised how many people do click on these things. We can engineer them to look very legitimate. That's the point. And then we can work with you if you needed us to make sure it gets past your firewall and all of your spam filters and things of that nature. But then we can do some of these types of webinars, et cetera, to show how to prevent some of those clicks coming through. So usually the improvement is pretty significant. Even if we can turn it from like 60 to 20%, it's still pretty positive. I'll let you go on, Shane.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point, Eric. Awareness is the key here, right? You need to know what you need to be paying attention to in order to pay attention to it. So it's great to help your staff learn those things. And then if you do identify a fraudulent email, make sure you're calling it out, right? Don't just be like, oh, that's trash, I'm just going to delete it and ignore it. Especially in the event, like I mentioned earlier, if it could be something that's related to a colleague or maybe another organization that you work with having their email accounts compromised, it's important that you let someone know on your team, or maybe send a quick chat message to the rest of your team. Just, hey, I got this, watch out for it in case you see it. And then of course, please delete it. And if you're a SWICKtech client, you can certainly let us know, and we can help you kind of filter those types of things out.
I would add to that, oftentimes when someone's been compromised like this, someone on the attacker, like the attacker, has disabled the ability for that person to receive messages that may have told them that they've been compromised. They've changed the rules in their email, Outlook, or whatever it is. A phone call will go a long way with these. When I've seen some of those come through from vendors, because it happens, pick up the phone, call the person and say, hey, I think you may have been compromised. I've gotten this email from you and I don't think that we've engaged before, or I wasn't expecting this, or did you mean to send this to me? And it's oftentimes they'll be very thankful that you let them know, and then they can take the proper actions.
That's a great point.
And call them as soon as possible to make sure that someone else didn't fall for that spoof elsewhere, so they can stop it quickly and get it remediated, and get some communication out to those folks saying that, hey, I've been compromised, please don't click this.
Cool. So that's really everything we had on the email security front. Next up, we want to touch a little bit on web security and what that means, how to protect yourself from the internet in general. So first up, there's a lot of different browsers out there. Feel free to share your opinions in the Q&A if you have some about your favorite browser. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong browser here. Really, the important thing is that you make sure it's up to date, right? So Safari is baked into your Apple operating system on Macs, and that's going to be regularly updated through your system updates. And then Edge on the far right side there, the same thing, that's baked into your Windows operating system, so that will be updated. But if you use Chrome or Firefox, just make sure you're paying attention and running those automatic updates, closing out the application periodically to ensure that it's up to date, so it can protect you as best as it can. And then I do want to call out that Internet Explorer, the blue E with the halo around it, is pretty dated now. A lot of businesses may still have apps and stuff developed for it that work only in Internet Explorer. So just be careful that if you do have to use it for some specific company need, that you're not just defaulting to using that old browser for everything that you do. So a couple of things to call out.
There's a question, Shane, on that one, Google versus Google Chrome.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So the middle one there is Google Chrome, and that is the web browser to use. Google is like the web address for documents, or sorry, for searching. So a little bit different. If you're asking, maybe you meant Firefox versus Google Chrome. They're both going to have great pluses. Firefox and Google really pay attention to security, so those are good. Obviously, Apple pays attention to security, so Safari is a good browser to use. And then Microsoft Edge is actually the new version of Edge from Microsoft is built on what's called Chromium, which is the engine that runs Google Chrome. So it's really one and the same from a security perspective. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, Lori called out government websites use IE. Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. Some websites will only work with IE. Companies and governments that maybe don't have the resources to update some of their applications and stuff are kind of falling behind on the security front for that sort of thing. So it's just important to keep in mind you shouldn't just actively be using IE all the time for all of your needs, but sometimes you might have to. So reading URLs, right? We already touched on this on the email front, but I just wanted to call out oftentimes a lot of malicious attacks that you might get in a link in an email are going to take you to a real web browser, the web browser you're using on your computer, and it will have kind of a screen capture inside of that showing you a fake web bar with the URL you're expecting. So it's just important to be familiar with the web browser that you're using, so you can sniff out fake details like this. So you can keep an eye on that sort of thing. So understanding encryption. So HTTP versus HTTPS is kind of the header of a domain URL that you would see. HTTPS is going to be one that's an encrypted connection, which means the company has gone through the efforts to apply an SSL certificate to make that website a bit more secure. This certainly isn't like a blanket, okay, good, it's HTTPS, so that means everything's perfect and secure. But you can be a lot more comfortable using that type of website. And really, ultimately, I would recommend not to visit or make any sort of transactions or put any sort of information into a website that is just HTTP. All right, moving along, we want to talk a little bit about account security next, right? So you've got your general emails, you've got your web browsing, and then your account level, which relates to your passwords and making sure you're the only person that has access to your information in your accounts. So we're going to walk you through here some best practices, and then we'll have some recommendations toward the end what you can do. But really, when it comes to accounts, just make sure you're not reusing the same password across a bunch of different websites, right? That may seem obvious to some, but it's definitely something that happens a lot. And also use a password manager, right? So that's a really easy way to make sure you're using different passwords across different websites, is to store them all in a password manager so it can manage them for you, and you don't have to remember every single site's every single site's password. So, and then when you're creating passwords, make sure you're avoiding simple words. You know, don't put your name in the password or your birth date, any personal information, that sort of stuff. And then it's also important to make sure those passwords are strong and they're using that they're unique, right? So that's where the password manager comes in. Again, if you use more unique passwords, something you can't even remember, and you store it in your password manager, that's a great way to avoid a scenario where someone else is going to be able to guess your password. And then the true security that you can do outside of the passwords, right? Because any password can technically be hacked. It's just a matter of the right software and the right tech knowing how to do it. So make sure you turn on multi-factor authentication for everything that you access that's important to you. Oftentimes this will be baked into a lot of bank accounts, but you have to manually go in and turn it on for things like Amazon or your Facebook, but you certainly don't want someone else getting into your Facebook account, and you don't want someone getting into your Amazon account and buying a bunch of stuff. So make sure that you're using that tool. We'll touch on what multi-factor is if you're not familiar with it in a moment. And I see a few questions here I want to answer just before we move on. So someone asked, do we have some examples of a password manager? LastPass is a good password manager. Bitwarden is another common one. Here at SWICKtech, we supply one called Passportal that's more for organizations and administrations. So if that's something you want to light up for your entire company and give them access to a really great password tool, Passportal is a good option. A lot of the different ones like LastPass and 1Password are going to be good. You just have to make sure that you have the right version, right? So some of those are going to be paid for, and you're going to want to pay for the right one for you, dependent upon your needs, if you need it across a bunch of different devices or that sort of thing. And that question segues into this slide, benefits of a password manager, right? So what are some big benefits? Obviously, you can use unique passwords. You don't need to remember your passwords now, so you don't have the risk of handing them out accidentally. You don't need to have a keyboard or a post-it note underneath your keyboard with your passwords on it. That data is encrypted and only accessible to you, right? So if you have a spreadsheet and you're saving all your passwords in your spreadsheet, if someone gets on your computer, now they have access to all of your passwords to all of your different accounts. And then it also offers access to your passwords across devices, right? So if you have an appropriate password manager that allows you to install it on your iPhone or your Android device plus your computer, it's going to be a lot more convenient for you to access the information you need from those accounts. And then, of course, it also allows you to store additional notes and details. So oftentimes, password managers will have an ability to have a notes section or even additional hidden fields, maybe for storing your security questions that you might forget, 15 years later, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, what was my favorite movie in 2004? Probably The Matrix. No, I don't know. And then one thing I'll add on to this is the question I've gotten when we talk about a password manager is, well, gee, now all of my passwords are in one place. Isn't that going to be a security concern for targeting, et cetera? And sure, what we recommend there is to apply multi-factor authentication to that, also known as MFA. And I think the next slide will cover what that is. I just wanted to make sure we mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so jumping into what multi-factor authentication is. So the idea here is that it's using multiple forms of knowing that you are who you say you are, whether that be the password that you have, right? So something you know, something that you have, your phone, or another application on your phone, and then something that you are, right? So your biometrics, right? So we all know with iPhones and Android devices nowadays, a lot of them have fingerprint recognition or face recognition. And then how that kind of works in a real life example, you'll see on the left here is a screen when you go to sign into your Microsoft email account, your Office 365 account. It's going to ask you to punch in a code from your Authenticator app. And then on the right-hand screen, this is a screenshot from Microsoft Authenticator, which is one of the top authentication apps that you can use on either iPhone or Android. And it'll show you the specific code for your Microsoft account. You go ahead and type that code in and hit verify, and now it's going to say, okay, you've got your right password, and you've provided me this random 6-digit code that your app spit out, so I'm going to let you onto the site. This is clearly you. Right, so in the event that someone would maybe steal your password from a dark web site, or if you entered your credentials into a phishing scam, having multi-factor authentication is going to stop them from gaining access to your account, because even though they type in that password, they're not going to have this random code. Eric, you want to touch on dark web scanning?
Yeah, you brought it up in the last slide. Speaking of, if your credentials are found on the dark web, which is a thing, we can do a scan for you to determine, have you been exposed on the dark web, or your passwords out there for those bad actors to grab and try to do a brute force attack to, keep trying to get into various websites with that information. So it's really important, like Shane said earlier, about not using the same password everywhere, because if it's compromised somewhere, everything you're accessing can in fact be compromised if they're going to run algorithms and try to run bots through that. So that's something that SWICKtech offers for free if we want to, just up to a certain amount. I think it's up to 5 specific like URLs or domains. If you want to send us your email or a couple people from your organization on your executive team or what have you, we can run that and let you know, A, have you been exposed, and B, if so, what can we do about it? And sometimes it comes back and you're squeaky clean, and that's reassuring. So that's what we have there. I think you still have control of the slide deck, so. Oh, Shane, you're muted.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
So what can you do, right? This is a bit of a summary. We want to touch on all of these benefits that you can use, these tools that you can use to your benefit to avoid being scammed, right? So spam filtering is a really simple, easy way. A lot of email applications offer a spam filtering tool these days where you can set up some general rules where it's going to block and avoid a lot of the spam that people are going to see. Exchange Online Protection is a common one that people use tied into their Office 365 accounts, where you can go in and set, how strong of spam filters you should set. Obviously, you don't want to limit everything, right? You would still want to get new leads and business emails that you're expecting, but it is a good starting point. And then to build on that, there's a concept called safe links offered by Microsoft. In their kind of protection package, they offer this feature where it's going to go in and scan malicious links before you even have the opportunity to click on them. So it kind of takes you out of having to even click through those links, because if you do, it's going to stop you from going to that malicious website. We can't stop all of those though, so that's where the training and the phishing campaigns come in that we mentioned, right? Making sure you understand who the email is coming from, the links that are in it, if they're going to an appropriate site or not. And then of course the phishing campaigns to make sure that people understand what they should be looking for. And then that last piece, Eric just touched on, the dark web scanning and ensuring that your information is not posted out there on the internet somewhere if you have a compromised account or password.
Yeah, and the big component of today's presentation really is, like we talked about at the beginning, the human firewall. Obviously, like we said, there's a lot you can do on the technology stack, but there is some sort of fine line that exists there where you still need to do your job and have things come through. You can't just be completely, dark and get nothing. So, things need to get through, and certain things are going to get through. These attackers, like we talked about, they're very sophisticated. They have a lot of money, and they're acting as full-blown businesses overseas, some bigger than the companies they're preying on. So it's just the training that you can put around this really is critical to inform people onto what to look out for. And it's sad because sometimes you feel like you're patronizing people, like this is how you evaluate a link, or don't download attachments. We've heard these things before, but there's a deeper look you have to take, because they really are contextually putting things in front of people that will play on some sort of emotional response to get people to click.
Thanks, Eric. And that's really everything we have. We'll jump into some Q&A, but before we do, we just wanted to point out that in 2 weeks from today, we're hosting another webinar to talk through, how you can better work from home and how you can be the best remote employee and an all-star with Microsoft 365 and all the tools and features that it offers.
Yeah, we're doing this webinar via Microsoft Teams. We've been leveraging it heavily, but there's a lot of tools around Teams that work really well for remote. So we're excited to cover that topic as well. We eat our own dog food here at SWICKtech. So we want to open the floor up if there's any questions. We have a couple minutes here. Anything maybe we didn't get to, or some burning questions, let us know and we'll answer them.
I did see quite a few people ask the question around what kind of password manager they should use. So I just wanted to touch on that again real quick. There are a handful of them out there that are super common. Those are going to be LastPass, Dashlane, 1Password, Bitwarden. Those are going to be kind of the most common ones out there that everyone uses. Everyone seems to love the one that they use. So you're not going to, people are only going to recommend the one that they have, but they all do a lot of the same features. It's just going to be a matter of if you want one that can spread across multiple devices. And some of them are going to be a payment plan if you have a certain number of passwords to store or additional information. But yeah, just do some research on the one that you prefer, what works with the devices you have. Maybe it's dependent on the cell phone, the smartphone that you have, and which app works best on that. All of that is going to come into play when you're picking a personal password manager. And then some of them also offer enterprise plans, so just keep that in mind. If it's something that you're looking for to be able to deploy to an entire company or organization, you're going to want more of an enterprise plan so that it can be managed and administered by your IT team.
If there's anything that you all would like us to cover in any upcoming events, please let us know. We have good resources to put together some information that could help if you're struggling with something, you want to learn something or enable some sort of technology. We'll be sending out a Net Promoter Score survey tomorrow morning for this particular seminar. That'd be a good place to put anything you'd maybe like to hear from us about.
Great. Well, it looks like we've got a question here, Eric. What spam filters are part of Microsoft Exchange? So Microsoft offers what's called Exchange Online Protection, and it's going to be, that's the tool you'll use for the spam filtering. But when we're talking about spam filtering, really it's more specific to the individual type of tool that you're using for spam filtering. So there's a couple of features that we recommend, and this isn't just for Microsoft Exchange. This is kind of across any email stack. Any, email, technically speaking, is plain text, and so there's some records and tools that you can put in place on your domain to control what's allowed through on spam fronts. I'm going to post to that question just a few acronyms that I want to call out, right? So 3 key pieces to kind of your spam filtering tool chest are SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. SPF, I won't get too technical on these, but just to kind of give you a brief feel for how these help. SPF is a framework for deciding who can send on behalf of a domain, right? So you only want people who are part of your @SWICKtech.com domain to be able to send. But oftentimes, maybe you have a MailChimp account that sends email on your behalf, or a SurveyMonkey, something like that. That SPF tool is designed to allow only certain people and records to be able to send on your behalf, so you can avoid someone else having access to send on your domain. And then DKIM is kind of like a notary stamp. If we're thinking of traditional mail, it's kind of checking to make sure that that mail comes from the right people. And DMARC is analyzing all of that. So it's putting that in together and understanding, does this mail seem legit? Does this email seem like it's coming from where I think it is? Yes, okay, I'm going to send it off to the account. And there's a lot of settings you can tweak in there to say how strict you want to get. So you just have to be careful that you're not throwing away email you need, but you can use those tools to kind of tweak and adjust how you filter out spam. I hope that wasn't too technical. I got a little nerdy there on us, Eric, didn't I?
You're okay.
All right, cool. And then it looks like we've got another one. Do you see Microsoft pushing or forcing people to move from Office 365 licenses to Microsoft 365? Wow, Brian, this is a great and super, super topical question. The answer is yes, but I don't think it's in the way that you think. So Microsoft is actually decommissioning or getting rid of the Office 365 concept altogether. I think officially in about 2 weeks here. So April 21st, they are going to be switching over to Microsoft 365 licenses altogether. It was confusing enough having both, so they're kind of finally starting to clean it up and moving to Microsoft 365. I don't know what that means for the licensing on Windows 10, if it will be baked into all of those licenses. I'm assuming they're going to kind of still have certain tiers that won't have those features like Microsoft licensing and device management. But we're just going to have to wait and see and find out what Microsoft releases on the 21st before we can confirm the route they're taking on that. Great question, though.
Thank you.
It looks like that's all we've got, Eric. So we'll go ahead and close up shop. Thanks, everybody, again, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And as we mentioned, in 2 weeks, we'll be back here to tell you a little bit more about Microsoft 365 and all the cool, awesome features it offers for working from home.
Cool. Have a great day, everybody.